Welcome to the celebration of life here at Bagale. Thank you all so much for coming. We're so pleased that you're able to make it. My mic's not, I'm not talking into it, that's the problem. Thank you again for coming. This is a really special thing to me, and I want to thank the university and his friends who all helped put this together, but most of all, Ed's family, who were here in Moss. I won't make them stand up because they'll never sit down, but anyway, they put this program together, not just the program, but if you look at the brochures and if you signed a Tree of Life, and if you, excuse me, if you got some of Ed's famous rub that's at the registration table, that was all done by his family. And I'm so appreciative of what they've all done. I think it's been therapeutic maybe for all of us in many ways to have this opportunity to celebrate with you all. So you all have programs, hopefully, and we're going to get started. And where's John? John and is going to be the spokesman for the family and for the first part of the program.
What a privilege to be here and see all of you, so many of you. We've had the joy of meeting at celebrations that Ed and Gail had put together for us. Traveled from all across the country. So many wonderful friends. That Ed was a generous man. He was the most generous man I've ever known. And his generosity was always driven by bringing people together to get things done, to celebrate life, and celebrate friendships. So I'll bet most of the folks in this room I've had the pleasure of meeting, and my siblings as well, because it was always about sharing, always about bringing people together, and I think we all know that. Bringing people together to get things done. Ed was also the patriarch of our family for almost the last 20 years. And as a responsible man, the responsible man he was, he kept our family together. I don't think our family would have likely stayed together in the same way that we have without Ed, and of course, always with Gail, bringing us together, holding occasions, making sure that we came together every year on occasions, and our children, our grandchildren, the children and grandchildren of my siblings were all adopted by Ed and Gail. They were like second parents to our children and our grandchildren. And as such, not a single member of our family is not here today. And many miles were traveled to be here in celebration of Ed. We know that Ed was passionate about many things. He was passionate about music, and all of us in the family share libraries of music that Ed gave to us and shared with us. He was passionate about art. And our homes are adorned with artwork and instruments and beautiful works that, again, Ed and Gail shared with us. Above all, I think Ed was a really brave and courageous man, right to the very end. He was hopeful, he was optimistic. And we all thought, there will be one more silly phone call where he sings a song to us, one more time that we get to see him. But we all managed to be with Ed very near to the end, and he left us all with a feeling of hope that perhaps we can be the kind of man that he was, the kind of person he was. He was a good friend. He was a very good brother. We know what a wonderful husband Ed was. He was a man that we'll all remember and carry with us. We thought it would be appropriate. We have 3 generations on stage today, and we thought it would be appropriate to open the ceremony with a song, a Bob Dylan song. Our oldest granddaughter Joni is going to lead us, and we're going to accompany Joni in a Bob Dylan song, Ring Them Bells.
Them bells, ye heathens from the sea. Well, the focus of today's program is really on Ed the man that we all love and love. We need to talk about Ed as a public force as well for a few minutes. And that he was. Whenever I think of Ed, I think of the quote by the great and late Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who said, quote, "The central conservative truth is that it is culture, not politics, that determines the success of the society. The central liberal truth is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself." I'm going to do a reading in Ed's own words. Ed was not a writer, but he was forced to do an essay for the 50th anniversary publication of the University of Michigan Dearborn. And after the editorial folks at the university got finished with it, it came out as "A Sunny Day on the Rouge." As written, it was "A Sunny Day on Chet Creek." By Ed Bagale, Vice Chancellor for Government Relations. In the fall of 1992, I hosted a fundraiser for the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives, Curtis Hertel, in Fairlane, the National Historic Landmark home of Henry Ford. I asked Mr. Hertel what he thought the press would say about Detroit when the ball dropped on January 1st, 2000. Would people remember the arsenal of democracy or the American middle class that was invented here? Would Detroit still be a magnet for immigrants around the world? Would it be the center of American manufacturing? Or were we destined to become a rusted out technological backwater, abandoning our urban core, squandering our natural resources, importing our steel and cars, and exporting our best human capital to the Sun Belt, Pacific, or Atlantic coast? These were scary questions. After our second beer, I suggested that any serious attempt to get answers should begin with a cruise down the Rouge River. Not knowing any better, the speaker agreed to spend a day and ponder these questions further. So I got my buddy Harold Scramstead, president of Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village, to pull his 30-year-old Boston whaler out of storage and join us for a luncheon cruise down the Rouge. Not appetizing, the most polluted river in the nation. We launched the Scram 1 at Eat Me, so named for the graffiti painted on the I-94 expressway. Motored up the river to the historic powerhouse at Fairlane and tied up the boat along Jen Jensen's beautiful limestone ledgework. It was a sunny Michigan day. Curtis was waiting and eagerly got on board. As we swung the boat around and began motoring down the river, we immediately noticed a night heron standing on the opposite shore, contentedly fishing. We saw a carp roll in the froth just below the dam, and there must have been 50 painted turtles sitting on logs along the banks. One could easily imagine the river had not changed in 100 years. Curtis said, "This is cool. I never knew this was here." Within minutes, however, we were at Michigan Avenue Bridge, where the landscape changed dramatically. First there was the road itself, and then the Conrail tracks with the river flowing under them. Below the tracks, Curtis noticed a very large concrete structure. "What's that?" he asked. "That's the infamous CSO," I said. "Every time we get a heavy rain, the sewers overflow into the stormwater drain, and Detroit dumps its sewage into the Rouge. Enough to fill Tiger Stadium and enough to qualify the lower Rouge River as the #1 spot in the EPA's areas of concern. That must be why the waters turn ugly," he said. On our starboard side stood Greenfield Village, another National Historic Landmark built as a living history classroom in 1929 by Henry Ford. Harold had turned the place into America's greatest history attraction, committing to telling the story of the history of innovation in America. Their motto is, "Ordinary people change the world, you can too." But the scene from the boat was anything but innovative. The river had become a concrete channel, a natural oxbow that once supported a Native American village. Fishing village was now separated from the river and it dried up. No more fish. It was not a pretty sight. Curtis was beginning to twitch. Continuing down the river, all we could see were the concrete banks and the 12-foot fence separating us from the rest of the world. Curtis was beginning to get a very different picture. He kept checking his watch, mumbling, "We've let things really deteriorate." In these 100 feet, he could see the effect of 100 years of neglect. As we approached the Ford Rouge plant, we encountered a huge conveyor belt stretching across the river and making a horrendous clanking noise. And at that very moment, Harold's trusty Mercury outboard died. As we drifted under the conveyor, pieces of slag from the Rouge steel smelting ovens dropped into the water around us. With eyes as wide as saucers, the speaker turned just a shade lighter than the river himself. He checked his watch and said, "I got to get back." Harold was frantically trying to get the motor started, and the boat was continuing to drift. Being the lobbyist in charge, it was up to me to say something. My mind was racing, and I needed to think up a number. So I fearfully turned to Curtis and said, "Well, Mr. Speaker, we are up shit creek without a paddle now, and it is going to cost you $50,000 to get up." While Curtis quietly pondered my intriguing proposition and Harold tried to clean the engine spark plugs, we slowly floated into the turning basin at the Rouge plant. We probably would have missed it if it was not for the 1,000-foot freighter hauling coal for the Rouge steel. We almost crashed into it. We sat there gawking at the most historic manufacturing facility in America, the world's first totally integrated factory that at its peak employed 100,000 people. A true icon of the 20th century. We wondered whether Ford would continue to make cars at the Rouge, or would the factory be abandoned for some farm in Alabama. Who, if anyone, would buy Rouge steel, which lost millions the previous year? How could fish live in the midst of such pollution? How could we restore spawning and nesting areas so wildlife could return? How could we get the cities and corporations located along the banks of the Rouge to once again see the river as an amenity and not a liability? How could we invigorate riparian neighborhoods and encourage culturally diverse families to invest in their community? How could we do this in an environmentally sustainable way? What positive role could a university like U of M Dearborn play? These were serious questions requiring complicated answers, most of which we did not have. We knew it would take a lot of money, which we also did not have. But Curtis was willing to commit the first 50 grand, and Harold was able to start the engine. I was thinking that $50,000 could certainly prime the pump. It did. We took the money and persuaded 2 renowned architectural firms to cut their fees by 90%. By leveraging the University of Michigan and the Henry Ford brands, we organized a steering committee comprised of some of the region's most inspiring leaders. We all worked as hard as a team for more than a year, and in July 1995 issued our report, A Shared Vision for Metropolitan Detroit. This became one of U of MD's first deliverables in our metropolitan vision. It became a catalyst for a public celebration of the centennial of the American automobile in 1996, federal legislation signing into law creating the Automobile National Heritage Area in 1998, a tricentennial of the City of Detroit celebration in 2001, $4 million in state funding for the construction of a university Environmental Interpretive Center in 2001. I call it Planet Gelderloos. The $2 billion green addition to the historic Ford Rouge manufacturing complex. The new Ford truck plant, creating 8,000 jobs in 2003. A visitor center attached to the Rouge factory in 2004, turning the plant into a tourist attraction that brings in 300,000 visitors a year. The first link of the Rouge River Greenway in 2005 that meanders through the campus and which will eventually connect more than a dozen cities, 3 national historic landmarks, 4 proud cultures, and 300 years of American history. Restoration of the Oxbow at Greenfield Village in 2006, reconnecting it to the river and hosting 23 species of fish, muskrats, fox, bald eagles, and millions of school children and tourists. And in 2008, Rouge Steel, now Severstal, a Russian-owned business, became the first American steel mill in 50 years to build a new blast furnace. Like 90 years ago, the world's best steel is forged in Dearborn. In 2009, the university at 50 continues to invest its intellectual, natural, and physical capital in building a sustainable Rouge River watershed and the high quality of life within it. Our 40,000 alumni learn lessons here that have allowed them to build careers, raise families, become leaders in communities, for sure, face many new challenges, but are also poised to leverage a proud history for a prosperous future. Ed wrote that. It is a very nice summary in his words of one particular project that he was involved in. Ed, as you know, was always involved in at least 24 similar projects, most of which came to fruition in many ways in ways that no one anticipated. But he was always the catalyst, always the center that brought them together. In terms of this particular project, Susan and I had an opportunity this morning to drive around and walk around the University of Michigan Dearborn campus. And I would suggest, I think Dan Little is somewhere today, and it seems to me we probably ought to rename that campus the Eddie Bagale campus, since he was responsible for funding almost all of it. So something to think about for the future. And I think it speaks to the public ed, the one that really provided such a catalyst. This is probably a very impolite thing to say, but I'll say it anyway. Ed could bring together more people and more interesting people than probably any of us could bring together alive. I think that is an incredible legacy and that one we truly celebrate today.
My name's Steve Madewell, and Gail asked me to come up and speak a little bit about Ed the Fisherman and to do a little tune, perhaps, and I feel really privileged and honored to do that. You know, I met Ed, and we called him Fast Eddie. And I met Ed actually through some of the work that was just spoke about. You know, I was working on we had kind of parallel interests, Ed and I did. I was working in northeastern Ohio with the Lake Metro Park system, and I was working on an 8-county regional open space plan. And one of my buddies, one of Ed and my mutual friends, Paul Lapovitz, he suggested that we bring Ed together, bring him down to northeastern Ohio to talk about how people could come together and work together. And he was telling me similar stories about Ed's ability to pull people together. And so that's how I met him. And you know, and as I got to know him over the years, we realized what an incredible Renaissance man Ed was. John was talking about his love of art and culture and music and whatnot. And I mean, it just went on and on. You know, when Mary Jo and I got to know Gail and Ed, we found out that Ed was a remarkable weaver. And it's like, where does this stuff stop? You know, it just goes on and on and on. And you know, while I was working as the director of Lake Metro Parks, I would occasionally call Ed, you know, get inspiration and talk to him about some of the work I was doing there. And I remember one time calling him up and saying, Ed, I just got $1.8 million to buy some open space along the Grand River, along these steelhead streams and whatnot. And he says, well, that's a start. And he had this term for me in my professional world, you know, in the conservation arena. He used to call me, pardon me, hot shit. That's pretty good, hot shit. I just knocked down $32 million for the university. So get to work and get busy and stop sitting on your butt. And then there was this whole fishing thing. And Paul Lapovitz started, he invited Ed and a bunch of folks to come down and go fishing with us. And, you know, we were chasing this steelhead in northeastern Ohio. And if you know what a steelhead is, you know, it's big lake-run trout. And they were the perfect fish for Ed. He used to call them big mambo fish, right? And they were the perfect fish for Ed because Ed did everything big. I mean, he was just a big, big person. And fishing was one of Eddie's big social events. It was a great excuse for him to get his family together. I was privileged to get to know what a remarkable family he had. And and when he would catch a fish, or anybody would catch a fish, he would get so excited, and he would be running up and down the stream, and he would be really making a spectacle of himself, and which was really antithesis of the way I approach fishing. He used to call me the fish whisperer, but he would get really excited. And one of the things I'm going to let you in on in the fishing character of it, he swore a lot. That might have been out of character for the other Eddie that you know, but he was really a wonderful guy, and we had many great times together. Now I'm going to do this one song that kind of captures a little bit of some of our stories on the river here. Okay. All his buddies call him Eddie the Thumb, and he's the guy that's always on the go. You happen to be planning a fishing trip, Lord, he's the guy in the know. He's been to exotic locations, and he's fished with all the best guides. There's no need for innovation, 'cause he's also the gadget guy. He's got on brand new waders, I believe his shirt's even been pressed. And every fishing gadget known to man is hidden inside of his vest. He told me it's not about catching fish, it's more about how you look. Clothing and gear, single malt and craft beer, let's not forget those author signed books. He's always had a game going on now, first, biggest, maybe the most. And if you would win, you'd get a very nice Chomsky, 'cause he was always the consummate host. If you should happen to catch one, be prepared for the big yell. A grip and grin, picture, catch and release, then wash your hands clean with Purell. Vanity plates are a must-have. Clean your shoes if you rode along. With his GPS on his brand new iPhone, you'll never get lost or be all alone. Well, it's not about catching fish, it's about having all the right stuff. And one thing for sure with clothing and gear, with that, more was never enough. I said more was never enough.
Okay, I think I need everyone who is a Ribland, Birdland, rib-off winner up here on the stage. Back up, because I'm not doing this alone. So the assembled how to say it? The assembled winners who participated or who were allowed to participate, and eventually, due to public protest, were allowed to win occasionally at the now infamous Birdland Rib-Offs that Ed and Gail and family hosted so many Augusts that it's hard to keep track. I think this was the last one, the 25th?
That's right, yeah.
25th, so 25 years of hosting the best barbecue in the nation, something Michigan is not known for. Wasn't easy to pull off. So we're here, and I've been asked by Gail to sing, which I cannot do. I think to add to a sense of humor for some of you who know us up on the stage. So what we're going to do is we're going to sing the song that's on the third page of your program, the Birdland Rib-Off Anthem. The lyrics were written by Bagale, who clearly labored over these a long time. And, but for the music, she picked the song, The 12 Days of Christmas. So this will be familiar to you, the cadence of the words. Gail called up a couple of weeks ago, where I currently live now in New Orleans, and she asked me if I would not do the honors, and at first I just totally laughed, and then I realized it was Gail asking. And that if I truly loved her the way I said I did, I better just shut up and do it. So I did. And also we do this, of course, in Ed's memory, who I hope will be laughing hysterically wherever he is by the time we're done with this attempt to honor the rib-off. So this is being done a cappella, and I just have to pick a note here. Okay, you got me back. What was that? At the first Birdland Rib-Off, two brothers did compete for the best barbecue of the year. At the fifth Birdland Rib-Off, the trash talk came of age. Cigars getting stoked, beers getting guzzled, more bros competing for the best barbecue of the year. At the seventh Birdland Rib-Off, the trophy did emerge. One chronic winner, cigars getting stoked, beer getting guzzled, more bros competed for the best barbecue of the year. At the 12th Birdland Rib-Off, the chicken jerks joined in. Two trophy winners, cigars getting stoked, beer getting guzzled, more bros competed for the best barbecue of the year. At the 13th Birdland Rib-Off, Gen Xers aged in, competing for the trophies, cigars getting stoked, beer getting guzzled, more bros competed for the best barbecue of the year. At the 25th Birdland Rib-Off, 'twas the biggest one of all. 10 bros competed, chicken jerks returning, cigars getting stoked, beer getting guzzled, bribes band at last for the best barbecue of the year.
And first, a little word as to why I'm here. Several years ago, when Eddie and Gail visited us in our home in Virginia, Eddie took me aside and he said, Beaner, Ed was the only person who ever called me Beaner. Years ago, I made the mistake of telling Eddie that my dad called me Beaner when I was 5 or 6 years old. I wore a little beanie cap with a propeller and whatnot. And for 40 years, he never called me Bruce. It was always Beaner. Anyway, he pulled me aside and he said, Beaner, let's make an agreement. the first one of us to die, the other will give the eulogy. I said, are you serious? He said, yes, and so I'm here. And so for today, for the last time, for Eddie, I'm Diener. In addition to the extraordinary work that Eddie did for the University of Michigan, Dearborn, he was, as some have already said, involved in a staggering number of other organizations and efforts. He founded some, like the Rouge River Gateway Partnership. He chaired others, like the Henry Ford Hospital. And he was on the board or a driving force of dozens more. But Gail told me, don't talk about all of his accomplishments. They can learn about that from others. Tell what Eddie kind of meant to you. Give some anecdotes. And don't say anything that will make anybody cry. There'll be no tears, no sadness. This is going to be a joyful celebration. So let's try. I met Eddie 50 years ago. We were undergrads at Oakland University together. He was a remarkable guy, immaculately dressed, suave, debonair, genuine, generous, likable, intelligent, a great, great friend, very self-confident. It seemed like there was nothing beyond Eddie's reach. Eddie was, as you've been told, a connoisseur of the arts. He had a keen knowledge of just about every music genre, although he really loved jazz. And he had a knowledge of most famous musicians, most artists. And he talked often of how his family was so musically inclined and how proud he was of that. Sorry, Gail. Eddie was also an artist. He was a weaver. He had this enormous loom in his basement. And over the years, he wove for us two great wall hangings. One was a combination of different textures and materials. I think you saw some like it. It had all manner of things in it, including some mink and gold thread. The second wall hanging was 8-foot-long strips, 2 inches wide, of butcher paper that it went on a then chocolate-covered wall in our living room, just perfect. Ed was also a connoisseur of food. He loved to cook, he loved to eat, and he loved it his way. There was a time that Eddie took me to Chicago, his hometown. He wanted to show me around a bit, and he wanted to go to dinner at a, I guess it was a famous French restaurant, famous at least for its steaks. And I said, Eddie, I can't afford that. And he said, I'll pay. So we went, and Eddie ordered this great T-bone steak. And the French waiter put our food down, and as he was walking away, he said, Bon appetit. And Eddie said, wait, I'd like some A1 sauce. And the waiter was clearly startled. This, I think, had never happened. And he said, mais monsieur, this steak does not need any other sauce. And he said, I'd like A1 sauce. He said, monsieur, please, just take a bite of it first. I'd like A1 sauce. He said, un moment, s'il vous plaît, and he leaves. And a minute later, this guy comes out with this enormous white hat, white jacket on, and he says, Monsieur, I understand you do not like the T-bone steak that I prepare for you. And Eddie says, no, I haven't even had a bite of it. I'm waiting for A1 sauce. And he said, oh, Monsieur, please. He said, just eat it, try it like this. No one has ever asked for sauce for this. He said, you will love it. And he says, I'd like A1 sauce. And I'm trying to get really low in my I'm thinking a little tense. Eddie looks at him and he raises his voice a bit and he says, who's the customer here? And the chef said, oh, all right, excuse me, one moment. And he leaves, and it had to be like 3-4 minutes later. This waiter comes out, breathless, with a brand new bottle of A1 sauce. And I'm sure he had run down the block to buy that. And Eddie loved the steak. And I started using A1 sauce. Eddie was a great storyteller. He had this wonderful, welcoming, melodious voice. I told him once, I said, Eddie, you're the only friend I have who doesn't care if I fall asleep while you're telling me stories. I mean, it was that kind of voice. And my kids loved Eddie. He paid attention to each of them, like I think he did with all young people that he was involved with. They especially liked, however, when he told stories about what we allegedly did. Now, Eddie was playful, sometimes a bit mischievous. He and I rented a room together at Oakland University. We were on the 2nd floor, and beneath us was the landlady, a Mrs. Carraras. She was very strict and a little crazy. Eddie nicknamed her Cookie Carraras. And anytime that we talked too loud or music too high or laughing too much, she would take what we assumed was a broom handle and rap on her ceiling, which was our floor. And so we would quiet down. This annoyed Eddie a little bit, and the first Halloween he said, I want to play a prank on Cookie. He said, we're going to go out and to her picture window, and I'll knock on the window, and I'll spray lighter fluid on the window, and you throw a match on it. And it'll just, boom, you know, it'll really be a fireball. And I said, Eddie, I can't do that. I'm not going to burn this place down, or I don't want to hurt the window or anything. And he said, no, it's going to be like flash paper. It goes really fast, and it doesn't hurt a thing. And so, after all the trick-or-treaters, we go outside, and the curtains are drawn. Eddie raps on the window, and Cookie comes, and she's opening the curtains as Eddie sprays this lighter fluid, and I allegedly throw the match, and boom, big fireball. And Cookie obviously jumps back, the curtains close, and we run like the wind. And I'm told the police never found the perpetrators. Excuse me for a minute. Now, Eddie was very creative and a problem solver. For this vignette, I want to begin by saying that my wife, Norlene, has always been a straight shooter. She doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, doesn't cuss much. A real straight shooter. And so Eddie's telling this story in front of 2 of my kids. And he says, there was this time when we got Norlene to try marijuana. And This is not a true story. For anyone listening. So I said, whoa, Eddie, come on. This is not good. And my son said, well, you can't stop now, Eddie. You got us this far, you got to keep going. And so Eddie continues. He says, well, Norleen had a really bad trip on this. She started crying and kind of screaming, and she thought that she was waking up from a grave, that we were all in a graveyard. She was just petrified. Eddie says, get me some orange juice. I said, orange juice? Why? He said, just get me some orange juice. And so I got a half a glass of orange juice, and I brought it to him. He's kind of cradling Norleen, trying to calm her down. He says, drink this, honey. Nori, he called her. Drink this, Nori, and this will make all the bad go away. Everything will be good with this. And so she drinks this orange juice, and she stopped. She stopped crying. She settled down. And a little later, I asked her, I said, how did you know orange juice was going to do that? And he says, I didn't. I just thought if she believed, maybe it would work. And I kind of call that the magic of Eddie. April 1983, Norleen and I went on vacation with Ed and Gail. We went to Hawaii. We visited the Big Island. And Mount Kilauea, the volcano there, had erupted just 3 months earlier. And it was a continuous eruption. Hadn't done that in 20 years. And we had been trying to get pregnant for a number of years. Norleen had several miscarriages. Eddie told us that he had a hatched an idea. He said, look, there's this Hawaiian goddess, Pele, of the volcanoes. And she was created by the Hawaiian goddess Kumalipo, the goddess of fertility. And so we're going to do something. And so Eddie develops this little ritual. We're as close to the volcano as visitors could get. And he said that these Hawaiian goddesses will answer petitions of people if you can throw a sacrifice to them. And so we get as close to molten lava as we can. And Eddie starts this little dance, and then he starts chanting some mumbo jumbo about pregnancy. And he says, feed Pele! And so we throw these coins as far as we can into the lava. And in Eddie's defense, we were just having fun. And second, my oldest daughter, Ashley, was born 9 months later. Well, once again, the magic of Eddie. Eddie was a visionary and an optimist. He didn't ask why, he asked why not. And obstacles didn't frighten Eddie, they egged him on. He saw what could be or should be done, and he went about doing it, or he went about getting the people together who could. And it's already been said, but one of Eddie's greatest talents was pulling people together and persuading them that they could do whatever needed to be done. I asked Eddie once about his legacy. I said, what do you want for your legacy? And he said, I don't think about legacy. I think about what I can do to help people now. And there is now a Difference Makers Scholarship in Eddie's name at the University of Michigan. One of many of the legacies that Eddie has now. In 2010, Eddie was given the Eleanor Jositis Unsung Heroes Award for the work that he did in the Rouge River restoration. And it was a big, big deal, as I think you've already heard. Lasted some 20 years. Eddie involved federal, state agencies, municipalities, corporations, nonprofits, community groups. And when I learned that, I told Eddie how very, very proud I was of him. And he kind of fumbled a bit. And he said, oh, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so, they really deserve the awards. Eddie was content to remain unsung. And I loved him for that. We all did. We all loved the magic of Eddie. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Joe, and these are my brothers and my dad, and we are Eddie's nephews, and I have the pleasure of getting to write some music to some words that our Uncle Ed left for us. And I'd say it was probably about a week after Uncle Ed took off for his next journey. Aunt Gail was going through his iPhone through the notes section, and she found this poem called The Transplant Blues. And as far as we know, he didn't share this with anybody, though I'm sure he knew that we'd eventually find it. And Aunt Gail emailed me right away, and she sent me the lyrics, and she asked if I would like to set music to it. And I immediately said, yes, of course, that sounds like a blast. And it definitely was a challenge. And I went through probably 30 different arrangements of this until I found the right one. But I think what my Uncle Ed, I think one thing that he would agree with me is that sometimes work is the best tonic. And I can't think of a better way to mourn and celebrate his life than to collaborate with him. And the last one-to-one conversation that I had with him, one of the last things he said, Joey, you don't have to worry, I'm not going to go anywhere. And even though he's not physically here, somehow with this, he's right. He ain't going anywhere. And so we're going to play this song called The Transplant Blues. And my dad and I were started off. We're still working out the arrangement. My body's old, my brain is young. And I'm wondering, could I use a new lung? This journey could be long, the path would be steep. But I walk with Gail. All the
So last time I talked to Ed Bagale, he greeted me in the way he always did. Is she? Is she? And then he would sing on for a while before we actually talked. I've known Ed for a long time, and we shared a lot of things in common. Ed was an active force. He always worked to change and make this world better. So I worked with him at the University of Michigan Dearborn. I worked with them at Access, the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, serving hundreds of thousands of people. And I worked with him on a whole set of progressive projects, and I came to truly love him. But one of the things we most had in common was he was a real music nut, and so was I. Some of you know that I work as a radio host at WDET. I do a program called This Island Earth. And part of what I have to do is troll music from all over the world. So it's a constant search. It was a constant search for Ed. One of the last things he said to me is, "What are you listening to?" So we thought it fitting, both because of his Middle East heritage and also his great search for the beauty of music on this planet, that we finish up with some Middle Eastern music. And so I talked to a good friend who runs the Arab American National Orchestra. And he suggested a person who I've known for a long time too. He is a oud and qanun virtuoso. He has played all over the world. He is on many, many television and movie soundtracks. And we asked him, can you do a piece fitting of Ed and all that he's done to help us remember as we go? And so I'd like to introduce to you Victor Benham.
So I didn't have time to do a sound check.
but please join us for some refreshments in the hall, and maybe stop to admire the beautiful portrait that Ed's brother painted of him. Enjoy some of the barbecue rub that was put together by his nephews. And just maybe meet somebody new, because Eddie would have liked you to meet each other if you didn't know each other already. So thank you for coming. Thank you all very much.